You know that friend who never asks for help moving, never borrows money even when they're broke, never says I'm struggling, even when it's written all over their face? You've probably called them strong, independent, low maintenance. But according to psychology, something else is going on entirely, and it's not the compliment you think it is. Stay with me, because by the end of this, you're going to look at that person, maybe yourself, completely differently. Here's the thing nobody talks about. Not asking for help doesn't mean someone is capable of everything. It often means they've learned that asking doesn't work. And there's a real psychological story behind why. Let's start with where this actually comes from, because it's rarely random. Psychologists trace a huge chunk of chronic self-reliance back to something called attachment injury. Somewhere early on, usually in childhood, this person learned that reaching out for support either didn't get met or got met with disappointment. Maybe a parent was busy, overwhelmed, emotionally unavailable. Maybe every time they cried, they were told to toughen up. The lesson wasn't taught in words, it was taught through repetition. Ask and nothing happens. Ask and you get shut down. Eventually, the brain does something incredibly logical. It stops sending the request. Attachment researchers call this a dismissive avoidant pattern. And here's what's fascinating. It's not that these people don't have needs. Everyone has needs. It's that somewhere along the way, their nervous system rewired the entire concept of needing someone into a threat. Not physical danger, emotional danger. Because if you never ask, you can never be told no. You can never be let down again. A study published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that people high in avoidant attachment show measurably higher stress responses when placed in situations requiring them to rely on others, even when help was freely offered. Translation. For these people, receiving help doesn't feel like relief. It feels like exposure. But here's where it gets more complicated. This isn't just about childhood, it's also about competence. A lot of people who never ask for help are genuinely extremely capable. They've had to be. When you can't count on backup, you build backup into yourself. You learn to fix your own car, manage your own finances, solve your own problems at 2 a.m. instead of calling someone. Over time, this creates what psychologists describe as compensatory self-sufficiency. Real skill, built from real necessity, that then gets mistaken by everyone around them, including themselves, as proof they simply don't need anyone. So now you've got two things stacked on top of each other, a brain that treats asking as dangerous, and a set of real abilities that make not asking seem sustainable. That combination is exactly why this pattern is so invisible. Nobody intervenes on someone who looks like they're thriving. But here's the part that explains the drowning. Competence has a ceiling. At some point, the job gets too big, the grief gets too heavy, the debt gets too deep, and the same brain that's been avoiding help for 20 years doesn't suddenly develop the skill to ask. It just keeps applying the old strategy, silence, even as the water rises. Researchers who study burnout have found that chronic self-reliers are actually more likely to reach crisis points than people who ask for help early, specifically because they wait so long that by the time they break, there's no gradual decline for anyone to notice. It looks sudden from the outside. It was never sudden on the inside. And this is where the identity piece comes in, because for a lot of these people, being the reliable one isn't just a habit, it's who they think they are. Psychologists call this identity fusion, when a coping mechanism becomes so central to how you see yourself that abandoning it feels like losing yourself. If you've spent your whole life being the strong friend, the one who handles it, asking for help doesn't just feel uncomfortable. It feels like betrayal of your own character, like you'd be lying about who you are. There's also a quieter, more uncomfortable layer underneath this. For some people, never asking for help isn't resilience, it's shame. They've internalized the belief that needing something makes them a burden. And that belief usually didn't come out of nowhere. It often comes from environments where emotional needs were treated as inconvenient, where a parent's stress, a sibling's crisis, or general scarcity meant there simply wasn't room for one more person's problems. So the child adapted. They became the one who didn't need anything. Not because it was true, but because it was safer than finding out the answer would be no. Here's something that might sound contradictory. These are often the exact people other people go to for help. They give advice freely. They show up for everyone else without hesitation. But the relationship only flows one direction. Psychologists call this a caregiver imbalance, and it's incredibly common in people with this profile. They've built their entire sense of value around being useful to others, which means asking for something in return doesn't just feel risky, it feels like it would undo the whole arrangement, like they'd stop being valuable the moment they became needy. So what actually helps someone like this? Not lectures about vulnerability, not being told to just open up. What actually works, according to research on earned secure attachment, is small, low stakes, repeated experiences where asking for something small is met with an ordinary, undramatic yes. Not a grand gesture, just proof over and over that reaching out doesn't end in disappointment. Trust like this isn't rebuilt in one conversation. It's rebuilt in dozens of tiny, boring, forgettable ones. If you recognize yourself in any of this, here's the part that matters most. This isn't a character flaw. It's a strategy that made complete sense at some point in your life. It kept you safe. It probably still works most of the time. But strength isn't measured by how long you can carry something alone. It's measured by whether you're willing to put it down before it breaks you. The people who never ask for help aren't weak for struggling. They're just finally hitting the one problem their old strategy was never built to solve. If this describes someone in your life, or maybe described you, you're going to want to see the next one, because it explains why some people can't accept a compliment without deflecting it, and the reason connects to everything we just talked about. Click it, it'll make a lot of sense.